The Rocky Mountains are home to over 7,000 black bears, large predators with valuable fur that can fetch up to $2,200 each. Catching even one could significantly mitigate Tom's losses for the winter. However, hunting black bears is fraught with danger, so Tom needed assistance. He called Tim over, and together they examined a map to pinpoint areas frequented by bears. After selecting a suitable location, they set out and soon reached the remote, wild mountains 40 kilometers away. Since the bears just woke up, their initial diet consists mostly of grass to aid their digestion. Being weak from hibernation, they lack the strength to chase prey, so Tom and Tim's first task was to find areas with lush vegetation. As they ventured deeper into the mountains with their torches, they found signs of a black bear, a conifer tree scratched by a bear, a common way for them to mark territory. This sighting encouraged them, and they continued their search, soon spotting fresh bear droppings and quickly following the trail. Unfortunately, their quarry turned out to be a deer, and since it wasn't deer season, their excitement was short-lived. They resumed their search for black bears, soon finding a fresh set of tracks that embarrassingly turned out to belong to a brown bear, a much larger and more formidable predator than the black bear, and one they definitely did not want to encounter. They quickly left the area, but continued their hunt for black bears in other regions. By evening, however, they had not achieved their goal. Tom's season seemed to be definitively over. With no other options, they headed home, marking the end of a long and difficult season. Over the past 2 years, Tom had consistently faced failure, and the poor returns were frustrating. Seeing his disappointment, Nancy came to comfort him, reminding him that at his age, the amount he earned no longer mattered as long as he was happy. Inspired by his wife's encouragement, Tom finally smiled. With that, the 5th season came to an end. There's a group of mountain dwellers who live by hunting, relying on their excellent skills. During their busiest times, the merciless cold descends on Alaska. It's only late November, yet winter has arrived early this year. Marty, who had harvested abundantly for 3 consecutive years, returned to his old trap lines due to shifts in international market demands. Despite the drop in mink fur prices from $200 to $5, other furs still fetch up to $500. The old trap line, more populated than the Tianqi Mountains, is notoriously unpredictable and poses a great challenge. Marty set out on his snowmobile, aiming to hunt snowshoe hares, essential prey that lives in the low shrubs 12 miles north of his cabin near a creek. However, an accident occurred when he discovered a broken rod under the hood. Needing to repair his snowmobile in the extreme cold, he first made a fire, gathered some wood, and lit a campfire. Luckily, he had spare parts and tools to replace the old parts, although the bolts were frozen solid. After a great effort, he managed to replace the parts and hurried home before dark, marking a tough start to the day. In a rugged and remote valley between the Alaska Range and the Kuskokwim Mountains, consisting of rocky terrain and shrubbery, no one lives except Morgan, who barely survived his first winter on the mountain. After renovating the area during the summer, making the yard look better, he was no longer alone. In spring, Marg was invited to care for pregnant mares, though both failed to give birth. However, Marg, who has always loved the outdoors, chose to stay, finding a sense of home in this desired lifestyle. In the wilderness, a small cabin housed a man and a woman who diligently built their life together, raising 2 dogs and 4 horses. After improving the land over the summer, today they planned to move the cabin to a permanent foundation. Previously, Morgan had only built it on log slides, allowing cold air to flow directly underneath, making winters extremely cold. The new foundation, reinforced with concrete and filled with sand, would insulate the structure from the cold wind and ground temperatures. They planned to use a winch to roll the cabin, selecting a tree stump capable of withstanding several tons of force. Morgan threaded a chain through the cabin's floorboards and attached it to the winch. As he started pulling the crank and the rope tightened, he stopped to explain the process to Marg. Together, they tightened the rope, applying even force to the cabin. Despite their efforts, the cabin remained immobile, likely because the slides were frozen. Using a stick as a lever, Morgan managed to loosen the ice at the connection points. Continuing to crank, the cabin began to move slowly, proving the method was effective. With their slow and steady efforts, they finally brought the cabin next to the foundation. To prevent it from falling apart, Morgan reinforced it and then continued cranking. With their joint effort, the cabin gradually moved to its designated spot. At the moment of completion, both sighed in relief, ready to face the winter challenges in his 39th season here. At 73, and after 2 unprofitable seasons, he decided to take on an apprentice, 35-year-old Sean, whom Tom had watched grow up and knew well. Sean felt honored. Tom was a renowned hunter, admired for his skills. Sean was eager to learn. They set out on snowmobiles to set mink traps. Tom had an apprentice today to whom he was teaching skills. He used rotting beaver meat, the best lure for mink, placing it inside a trap box. Though invisible, minks could smell it from afar, making this hidden bait more deceptive. Minks would enter the trap voluntarily. Tom secured the trap box on a pole and set the trap at the entrance. When a mink triggered it, the trap would instantly kill by catching its head. He then hung it below the box. Tom also poured fish oil on reindeer skin, a crucial part of the trap. He lit the reindeer skin with a lighter. The burnt smell mixed with fish oil would carry far. When minks followed the scent, they would find the beaver meat and meet their doom. Tom let Sean try setting the trap himself under his guidance. Sean showed strong practical skills, and Tom was pleased with his performance. Meanwhile, in Montana's Ruby Valley, a record snowfall drove herbivores away, leading predators to target livestock. Rich's mission began when a rancher called in the morning, reporting his cattle spooked by wild beasts. To start his truck, Rich heated the engine with a fire. Once ready, he set off with his hunting dogs, ready to instill fear in mountain lions. He stopped upon seeing tracks, but they were not from a mountain lion but a grizzly bear. Unusually active for this time, possibly due to hunger and not yet hibernating, Rich took a gun and went up the mountain alone. Following the tracks, he realized the grizzly was targeting the cattle. Recognizing the bear, listed as protected due to its endangered status, Rich could only fire shots into the air to scare it away. The shots frightened the bear into fleeing, likely deterring it from returning soon. Rich went back to his truck as it was getting dark, planning to overnight in the wilderness. His modified truck provided a comfortable environment, and he quickly fell asleep. This was the second lesson Tom taught his apprentice: how to extract brain matter from frozen deer heads for use in tanning leather. Tom began to saw. Although the skull was hard, it was quickly sawed through under the sharp saw. Both men worked together to pry the head open, revealing the frozen brain inside. Tom handed the saw to Sean, encouraging him to try cutting. The brain's fat softens the skin, making the leather very supple. The brains extracted from the 2 deer heads were enough to make 3 hides. After splitting the skulls, they took them inside to thaw. During this time, Tom processed a pronghorn hide, first scraping off the hair. The hair conceals the skin layer, and care must be taken not to damage the skin while scraping. Tom explained as he worked, and then let Sean try. Handling the 15-year-old scraper cautiously, Sean faced a great challenge with the pronghorn's thin hide, less than 3 millimeters thick. Despite his careful efforts, he accidentally made a hole. Tom, with his expertise, could repair it, but now there were 2 holes, making Tom less cheerful. Too many holes devalue the fur. To prevent further loss, Tom took over again, explaining the precautions to Sean. After finishing the scraping, they returned inside where the skulls had thawed. Tom used a spoon to remove the material, which he then added to hot water. He took the bucket outside to a meat rack, where he hung the soaked hide. This process had to be slow to avoid overstressing the hide. Tom let Sean try every step to ensure he remembered the techniques. They stretched the hide on a frame, and Tom sewed the holes with skillful, fast stitches that were nearly invisible. The final step was smoking, which after several hours brightened the fur's color. The hide could sell for up to $150, and its value could reach $500. Although Marty had caught some, he aimed to catch more, given their territorial range of up to 100 square miles. He had to venture further to capture others. Using planes for trapping was costly and risky, but with this year's low mink fur prices, Marty had to take such risks to make a profit. Before taking off, Marty had to switch the plane's tires to skis, since tires are only suitable for tundra terrain. But skis are the best choice for snowy areas. Marty started the plane and embarked on his journey, successfully taking off. He planned to fly 40 miles north to a place called Doom Creek, where he had trapped before. Marty chose to fly low to spot animal tracks, though he was unsure if he saw any. Preparing to land on the unstable, ice-covered river was risky, but Marty, skilled and daring, tapped the ice with the plane like a dragonfly testing the water's surface to gauge the ice thickness. He decided to land, and the plane settled smoothly on the river. Right next to it, he saw fresh animal tracks and laughed, realizing they were his own. With tools in hand, he walked into the woods. Unlike wolves or foxes, which are cautious, a simple trap could catch his target. Marty chose a large tree, designed a path beneath it, and used a grouse as bait. With the trap set above on a catch, his hunting trap was complete. After some time, Marty was setting up today's 8th trap, having laid a comprehensive trap network. Now, he was heading back to spend the night in the plane. Waking up in the plane, Marty was concerned about the cold night possibly affecting the plane's startup. When the time seemed right, he started the plane and continued on to the next location to set more traps using the same method, then flew on to another spot. Winter had already arrived in the Alaska range, and a long, cold season lay ahead. Last year, Morgan was unprepared and ran out of feed for his horses, who ended up chewing on tree bark for the last 2 months. Due to malnutrition, the horses couldn't produce foals in spring. Determined to avoid the same tragedy, Morgan planned to head to town to buy the last batch of supplies, a trip that would take 5 days. Fortunately, he was no longer alone to look after the livestock. With his girlfriend's blessings, Morgan set off before dawn. He walked 5 miles through the bushes, then boarded a raft to row 75 miles. As daylight broke, Morgan reached the shore, his heart sinking as he saw parts of the river had already frozen over, which was not ideal for rowing. Morgan didn't rush to start. Feeling confident in his preparations, he began his hazardous journey. Aware of the risks, as many had drowned in the river annually, he carefully managed the raft's increasing speed, striving to control it along the way. Before takeoff, he had to replace the plane's tires with skis. Tires are suitable for tundra, but skis are better for snow. Marty started the plane and set off, successfully taking off. He planned to fly 40 miles north to a place called Doom Creek. Flying low to spot animal tracks, he prepared to land on the icy river, a risky maneuver. Marty, skilled and bold, tested the ice thickness by tapping it and then landed smoothly on the river. Near the landing site, he found fresh animal tracks and realized they were his own. He then headed into the woods with his tools. Unlike wolves or foxes, the target animal was less cautious, so a simple trap would suffice. Marty set a trap under a large tree using a grouse as bait. After setting up, he returned to the plane to spend the night. Waking in the cold, he worried the plane wouldn't start, but managed to get it going. He continued setting traps in the same manner at the next locations. Winter was setting in over the Alaska range, and a harsh season was expected. Last year, Morgan had run out of feed for his horses, forcing them to survive on tree bark, which resulted in them being too malnourished to produce foals in the spring. Determined to prevent a repeat, Morgan planned a 5-day trip to town for supplies. Not alone this time, he set off with his girlfriend's blessings, walking 5 miles through bushes, then rowing 75 miles on a raft. At dawn, he reached the shore and saw parts of the river frozen, not ideal for rowing. He waited until fully prepared before starting the risky journey, knowing the dangers as many drown each year. Despite his efforts to control it, the raft was challenging to manage. In Montana's Ruby Valley, 50,000 cattle are the economic backbone, but attract dangerous predators. Rich, a lion hunter, uses hunting dogs to drive mountain lions down the mountain. The youngest dog, Skillet, only 7 or 8 months old, was under training today by Rich. The training involved locating and tracking scents. He poured some water on the ground, then added cougar urine to a rabbit skin to simulate a trail, ending at a large tree where he placed the skin in a cage. Since cougars and bobcats climb trees when cornered, the hunting dogs must learn to look up. Rich released 3 dogs, but they suddenly ran towards a canyon after hearing a huge call, encountering a bobcat. The encounter turned into a chase, but the bobcat, fierce and agile, managed to escape. The dogs, unwilling to give up, chased the bobcat up a tree. Rich checked the dogs for injuries, finding none. Since the day's goal was training, the bobcat was lucky. Rich left with the dogs, and back in cold Alaska, Morgan endured another long night outdoors. After 5 days in the wilderness, he was finally nearing the town, though concerns about his raft lingered. After 5 days of wear, the raft had several small leaks. Every hour, Morgan had to reinflate it. Fortunately, only 20 miles remained. Initially, the journey downstream went smoothly, but soon he encountered trouble. A row of ice shelves drifting slowly. If Morgan hit them, the raft would burst. He managed to steer clear of the obstacles, but then he felt the raft weakening. He went ashore to reinflate it and continued, but the raft's condition forced him to make frequent stops, which slowed him down considerably. Now he had to go ashore to inflate it again. Due to thin ice, Morgan nearly fell into the water and got half his clothes wet. The raft was leaking air fast, and Morgan felt like he was running out of breath. What was supposed to be a 3-hour drift had been indefinitely extended, and it was getting dark. Just then, he spotted an airplane, which greatly lifted his spirits. He planned to look for tracks on land. The town had only 350 residents, but to someone isolated for 2 years, it felt wonderful. He intended to finish his business quickly and leave. Soon, he arrived at a store to pick feed for the horses. A nutritious mix of corn, oats, and barley. Unable to carry it himself, he had to hire a plane for transport. Next, he selected household items. The array of goods was dazzling, but he chose only long-lasting foods like rice and various beans. He also saw oranges on sale and picked some for his girlfriend. Then, he spotted ice cream, a luxury he hadn't had in months, and decided to indulge. He aimed to keep his spending under $500 for this town trip. Stepping out of the store, he couldn't resist starting on the ice cream right away. It was delicious, and Morgan felt genuinely happy. He tested the sharpness of a knife on a fresh piece of meat, satisfied with its performance. This place is the ancient Ozark Mountains, home to a variety of wildlife and attracting gifted hunters who live off the land. Jason is a native son of these mountains, but had lived in the desert with his wife in recent years. They returned last winter, seeing some improvement in their lives. But a family tragedy struck, resetting everything. His father fell ill in the summer, underwent heart bypass surgery, but eventually passed away, leaving substantial medical and funeral expenses. Jason was forced to sell his family home, and since then, his family has been living. After 5 days of camping in a friend's yard, winter's arrival meant Morgan and his family urgently needed to find a permanent place. Jason decided to return to his old craft as a skilled knife maker proficient in various forging techniques. He set up a temporary forge to craft a rare knife blade for a new commission from a local who wanted a machete shaped like a python. He sketched the design on the furnace, donned his apron, and the forging frenzy began. The steel required repeated heating and hammering to slowly take the desired shape. After shaping, Jason polished the blade and heated it deeply for the quenching stage to harden the blade. Precise temperature control was crucial, and outdoors, Jason had to act swiftly and accurately to plunge the blade into oil, completing this within seconds. Thankfully, he succeeded. He wiped off the oil, but knowing too hard a blade can break easily, he reheated it slightly and then soaked it in oil again to achieve the perfect blade. While he was busy, his wife Mary, a professional leather worker, crafted a sheath from cowhide following the pattern of the blade. Jason's final step was attaching the handle. He clamped the blade between 2 wooden blocks and secured them with nails. but the wood cracked. So, he replaced it with rubber, which is waterproof and slip-resistant, making it an excellent material. He then tested the knife, satisfied with its sharpness. Back in the tent, Mary had finished the sheath. Jason, looking at the knife, was confident the client would be very pleased. Meanwhile, Morgan, having flown over the Alaska range, returned home with his last dollar spent on crucial supplies to survive the upcoming harsh winter. He had managed to buy a plane ticket at a very low cost because the flight was headed to a distant mining area and could drop him off along the way. After unloading all his supplies, the plane left. Waiting for Marg, he wondered where she was now. With only 5 hours of daylight in this region, they didn't have much time left. As time passed, Morgan felt increasingly cold and prepared to start a campfire. Suddenly, he heard the sound of bells. Marg arrived with the horses and their dog, whom he had missed dearly. The couple embraced. Morgan shared his adventures in town and handed Marg the oranges, delighting her as she hadn't tasted fruit in a long time. Together, they loaded all the supplies onto the horses. Then, riding horses, they began their return journey. With little daylight left, they quickened their pace. The horses, all Icelandic, maintained a good speed in the snow, covering 7 miles per hour. However, the most dangerous part of the journey was approaching, a small creek that had previously caused a horse to fall. Now, with additional weight, it was even harder for the horses to maintain their footing on the ice. The black horse, possibly traumatized, hesitated to move forward. Reluctantly, Morgan dismounted and led the bravest horse across first, hoping the others would follow. With Morgan's guidance, 2 horses successfully crossed, but Marg's black horse, under her urging, ran across and also made it to the other side. They continued on, facing greater challenges ahead. Due to a beaver dam, the creek had overflowed onto the bank, making the ground very muddy and treacherous for the horses. They proceeded carefully and managed to get through without incident. The rest of the journey went smoothly, and they arrived home as darkness fell. Marty, using a plane to set traps for capture, knew the pelts were valuable, potentially selling for up to $500 each. Unfortunately, after some time, he had nothing to show for his efforts and had wasted a lot of fuel. A cold snap had brought much lower temperatures, forcing him to stop flying. Now, 6 days later, with temperatures warming, Marty was ready to fly again. He was concerned that if any traps had caught prey, they might have been eaten by other predators due to his delayed retrieval. Marty set out to check his traps, each empty trap representing a financial loss. If he couldn't secure any pelts this season, he would face significant losses. 40 miles north, his first stop yielded nothing, and he kept the plane running as he hurried to the next location. Unfortunately, the second trap was also empty. His disappointment deepened. After spending so much time and effort, the lack of results was disheartening. By the end of the day, Marty had nothing to show for his efforts. With apprehension, he approached the next trap, only to find it empty as well. Frustrated, Marty cursed under his breath. A week had passed, and his plan had been devastatingly unsuccessful. Realizing the rarity of such a streak of bad luck, Marty knew he needed a new strategy to change his situation. He decided to return home. Unable to yield returns from this location, he decided to return home. The moment he saw his family, all his gloom vanished. For their happiness, he was determined to regain his strength. Tom had taught his apprentice 2 skills: setting traps for minks and extracting animals' brains for tanning hides. Now, he was about to teach Sean the 3rd skill: trapping beavers. The Kootenay River, a large local river, never froze even in the coldest weather. The 2 men, equipped with their gear, set out for a destination 50 miles away. It was Tom's first time in this area, but Sean, having grown up in the Bison River Valley, knew it well. They rode out in search of beaver signs, which typically gnaw on tree bark. Tom, observing through his binoculars while drifting downstream, found no fresh traces today, only an abandoned den. Beavers live in one area for a long time, moving only after depleting nearby food sources. Thus, this location was not worth setting traps. They continued downstream. For several miles, Tom saw no signs of beavers, which puzzled him. Disappointed, they finally spotted a fresh trail and some sticks with bark gnawed off in the river. Clear signs of beaver activity. A beaver dam usually houses about a dozen beavers. Tom decided to set a leg-hold trap here. He had Sean open the trap since beavers enter the water from the bank. Placing the trap at the water entry point would likely catch a beaver. Tom then secured the trap to a metal post with a cable, attaching a heavy object to the other end of the cable. If a beaver stepped on the trap, it would be dragged deeper into the water as it struggled, and this setup would also prevent eagles from stealing the body. Tom had lost many beavers to eagles before. To lure the beavers, Tom dabbed a bit of secret sauce on the ground, made from beaver glands to mimic their scent. Continuing downstream, they soon spotted another beaver dining area. Tom planned to place a coney bear trap there, positioned between two sticks, which he would hammer into the ground. The trap would sink into the water with the sticks. Both types of traps were intended for catching beavers. Now, they just had to wait. After setting several beaver traps, a few days had passed. It was time to check them. Tom felt strongly that today would be a good day. However, his expression soon turned to a frown when he noticed that the water level had dropped significantly. Due to the upstream Libby Dam, the river flow decreased, making it difficult for the beaver traps to function effectively. A quarter of Tom's annual income depends on beaver pelts. Failing to catch beavers would be a severe blow to him. There was a trap by the riverbank, but they were concerned about the boat hitting rocks, so they disembarked in the middle of the river and dragged the boat to shore. They found the trap exposed in the air, having caught nothing. Under these circumstances, they could no longer set traps, so they had to retrieve them. Tom was in a foul mood, as this setback was unexpected. They continued downstream. This year, the price of fur was at a historical low, making each catch crucial. Soon, they reached the second trap and burst into laughter upon arriving. There lay a beaver in the trap. Sean exclaimed in admiration of his master's skill. Under an expert like Tom, such a beaver pelt could sell for up to $500. This beaver was their first pelt of the year, making it particularly significant. Seeing the excitement on Sean's face, Tom felt as if he were young again, filled with youthful exuberance. They moved on to the third trap, which also contained a beaver. Despite the river dropping 2 feet overnight, these two traps were well below the waterline, allowing them to function effectively. Today's catch was satisfying and proved many beavers still lived in this river, promising a bright future. Back home, Tom began processing the beaver. He started a fire in the stove and took out some knives to skin the beaver, explaining the process in detail. For instance, a beaver's tail could be used to make a knife sheath. If sold directly to fur traders, a beaver pelt might only bring in $15, but with Tom's craftsmanship, it could fetch $500, a testament to the value of skilled labor. As winter set in Alaska, Morgan and Marg had to prepare for the harsh weather. The first task was to clear ice and snow from the roof, as icicles posed a safety hazard. Morgan planned to remove them all, but working on a slippery, 15-foot-high roof was dangerous. Thus, he decided to build a rain shield. Once, while hunting, he had come across an old cabin with lightweight aluminum sheets, excellent for waterproofing. Now, he planned to retrieve them. The ruins were deep in the bushes, 5 miles north. After some time, he reached his destination, breathless from walking through deep snow, and struggled to locate the cabin, relying on his vague memory as he continued searching. Unfortunately, the scenery in front of him was all too familiar. He spotted a chopped tree stump, indicating the cabin was nearby. Gazing at the ruins, Morgan felt a deep sense of nostalgia. Perhaps a hunter once thrived here, but now only traces remained. He reminded himself to be cautious and steady, striving to establish a foothold in the wilderness. He needed to find the aluminum sheets. After digging for a while, he finally spotted them. He retrieved the sheets, knowing that metal is very valuable in Alaska. Tasting success, Morgan decided to explore the area further to see if anything else of value remained. He pried large iron nails from the wood, another scarce resource. He remembered a barrel was also here, and soon unearthed it. The iron barrel was heavy but very useful, so he decided to take it back. Dragging it through the heavy snow, Morgan started his return journey. He had walked a distance and only had an hour left before dark, with temperatures continually falling. He raced against time, but the uphill path proved challenging. Swearing under his breath, he let the barrel slide down the slope before continuing on. He finally arrived home after dark.